Just want you by my side. We've been tossing, turning, staying up all night long. Just want you by my side. We've been tossing, turning, staying up all night long. Just want you by my side. We've been tossing, turning, staying up all night long. Tell me, baby, what's the problem? 'Cause I could try to figure it out. Oh no, oh no. Tell me, baby, what's the problem? I'm only picking up what you're putting down. You'll be tripping, I don't know what about. So what's the problem right now? Okay. I've been tossing, turning.
Chapter 2000. Waking up was by no means a simple thing when one took into account they were naked from the waist down and currently being used as a cuddly toy by some preteen with the grumpy older brother of Tails languishing within his belly button. Oh, and not to forget that one, 24 hours previously, was of the male gender and now rather tragically was in possession of breasts that would have had every guy he knew drooling like a simpleton. Harry sighed and squirmed slightly in the bedding. The kid snuggled into his awkwardly swollen chest, clinging to his clothing in an iron-tight grip that was making disturbingly warm and fuzzy feelings go all squidgy in his chest. He was quite certain that it was a female thing. That feeling, maybe? He hoped it was. He really didn't want to start going all Disney or Ginny over small and cute things when he had quite firmly told the two males present that he had been one himself not too long ago. It would raise eyebrows and cast his masculinity into doubts, and he sincerely hoped this place had some kind of sex change procedures. Hopefully one's better than the muggle world back home. Movement, and then a large hand smacked down lazily on top of them. The boy snuggled against him, crumpling his face as he slowly came to. Harry closed his eyes, feigning sleep, as the boy suddenly went tense. A moment later, he could feel the blankets shifting as the boy sat up. Cracking an eye open, Harry could see him pouting down at his hands. How they bore signs of blisters and burns, trembling ever so slightly. They were probably numb and tingly as well. He shut his eyes quickly as the kid got up, staggering a little before using a foot to flip the edge of the blankets back over the Gryffindor before making his way out. Distantly he could hear the kid asking a member of staff where the toilet was. He sat up, giving his chest a dirty look as he did so, and glanced over at the old man. He was still soundo, reeking of booze as he mumbled and giggled and drooled in his sleep, a goofy look on his face that reminded Harry of Ron when he was having one of those dreams. Shaking his head, Harry looked around in search of some clothes or at least a convenient bedsheet he could use as clothing, to no avail. All that was available was the thick blankets of their beds. A moment later, the door to the room slid open, allowing the blonde kid to come back in. The kid flushed and quickly hurried over to one of the large scrolls leaning against the wall. Hang on a second, Nichan, he told the Gryffindor. Aerosenin should have some clothes in here you can wear, he explained, unrolling it and biting down on his thumb. Harry hissed in sympathetic pain as the boy smeared a surprisingly large amount of blood onto one of the ink designs, a poof of smoke filling the air. A moment before, the boy was proudly holding up a gray dressing gown made out of cotton. Here, this should fit, he exclaimed cheerfully, ignoring the annoyed groan from the bed behind them as Harry scooched over and gathered it up. It smelt a little of grass and pine and a touch of molly body odor, but it was large. It would cover him about down to his knees. The sleeves would probably swallow his hands given how broad the shoulders were in comparison to his own, but he could live with that. Thanks, kiddo, he told the blonde before slipping it on, keeping it closed and then wriggling out of the blue top he had been given last night. Setting the blue one aside, he got to his feet. Hey, point me towards the toilets, would you? He asked. It took concentrated effort to force himself into stepping into the girls' toilets instead of heading for the men's. The inside wasn't that different. In fact, it was identical, minus the urinals and the addition of the bins beside the toilets. For the first time, Harry got a look at himself in the mirror and felt distinctly uncomfortable at the pretty, very pretty, stranger that looked back at him with bright blue eyes. He could have been the kid's elder sister with looks like this. Double-checking the door was locked and he was alone. Hesitantly, he let the robe he was wearing drop, studying himself in more detail, blushing furiously all the while. There wasn't much of a difference in height of this girl and his former self. They were both standing around about 5'5" in height. She was most likely an inch, maybe 2, shorter, but it was hard to tell in a mirror and without a point of reference. Thick, elbow-length wavy gold blonde hair, almost the same shade of acid yellow that the kid had. It was pulled back into a pair of pigtails that were now half undone after wearing them to bed. His body. Dudley's porn magazines had nothing on this. Seriously. Harry pressed a hand against his stomach and tensed, eyes widening at the muscle definition that rippled under soft skin. Christ, curves in all the right places and muscles that most athletes didn't obtain. If he was supposed to look like Naruto's older sister, he was somewhat curious about what his parents looked like. Bladder reminding him why he came in, Harry quickly grabbed the bathrobe and used the facilities, cringing a little in horror and embarrassment when he had to, well, clean up after himself because shaking it off was impossible when there was nothing to shake. Washing his hands, because he didn't want to think about what he had just been touching. That way-led madness. Harry made his way back to the room. The kid greeting him at the door with a sunny smile and a length of cloth, so you can hold your yukata shut, he explained before swiftly darting behind Harry and doing it himself. C'mon, let's get breakfast, Nichan, he exclaimed, grabbing his hand and pulling him off down the corridor. Hey, slow down, kiddo, or I'll trip. Harry squawked as he easily kept up and maintained his balance and, no, he wasn't going to trip. This body, it moved better than his old one. Harry received several rather curious looks. Some people stared at her as well, but the kid sneered and scowled straight back, making them look away surprisingly quickly. He was 12. How did a 12-year-old frighten off adults who looked like they had been taking care of themselves for a long time? The boy led him into a canteen, cheerfully chattering away about his plans for the day, which mostly culminated in training and figuring out this super awesome secret ninjutsu that he was going to master because he was going to be better than the yondaime blah, blah, blah blah, blah. Harry kind of tuned him out by the time his food reached him. It was definitely food, but Harry recognized very little of it. Sticky white grain rice, 2 unidentified grilled fish, a bowl of cloudy brown liquid with floating chunks of white in it, a small dish with what looked like dried seaweed on it, another dish of old baked beans, what looked like a boiled egg, and another tiny dish of what he did identify as dark soy sauce with some green stuff on the side in a separate dish. Deciding to play it safe, Harry made a start on the rice, awkwardly cradling the pair of chopsticks in his right hand as he contemplated how he was going to pick the rice up. He couldn't eat it a grain at a time, that would just take forever. He turned to watch Naruto and see how he handled it. The blonde boy was glaring at his hand, chopsticks discarded on his tray as if he had dropped them. Are you alright? The Gryffindor asked, frowning in concern when he saw the boy pick them up again only for his numb fingers to be unable to even grip them. The preteen seemed most upset with this development. Blue eyes blinked over at her in complete confusion before grinning at him so broadly and happily his eyes were squinted shut. I'm fine, Databia, he exclaimed enthusiastically, thumping his chest and grabbing the chopsticks again. Harry's nose wrinkled. The boy was nothing if not stubborn. Gimme your hand, he ordered, reaching out and holding his own palm up in front of him. The kid stared at him with wide eyes and Harry arched an expectant eyebrow. There was a pause before, hesitantly, Naruto placed the trembling limb into his hand. Drawing it closer, Harry examined it carefully. Spending so much time taking care of his own injuries under the Dursleys, silently managing aches and pains and strains from Quidditch practice and listening to Madame Pomfrey detailing his own injuries to him, at length I ate and lectured form, Harry was actually quite self-sufficient when dealing with his own injuries. Hermione was better with the charms and such, which was a given. She was a genius, but what she lacked was practical knowledge. She tried to correct that by jumping on every injury he and Ron had as if they were completely useless. He could understand that. Everyone assumed that the so-called Golden Trio had their areas of expertise, that Harry was the powerhouse attacker, Ron was the master tactician, and that Hermione was the brains and support for them both. Even his friends had fallen into that trap, forgetting that Ron was a damn good flyer and had an uncanny ability to understand people, even if he did use that understanding to hurt them when he was pissed off. Hermione forgot that she was a combat powerhouse as well. Yes, she wasn't as strong as Harry, but the way she used her spells and magic meant that she obtained the same effect for half the power. She forgot that she had her own leadership abilities and if need be could walk into a Death Eater lair and bullshit her way back out. Again. Just like they forgot that Harry had been taking care of himself for years, that he was more stealthy than he was powerful, that he knew more physical and muggle methods of getting what he wanted and needed than magic could provide. They forgot that, unlike them, magic was never his first option and because of that he had kept hold of something precious. Something that very few in the magical world possessed. Common bloody sense. Naruto winced as Harry began to massage his hand. It'll hurt for a bit, the Gryffindor explained as he worked. What I'm doing is stimulating overly tense and stressed out muscles and tendons in your hands and fingers. Getting the blood flow to work and hopefully settling your nerves. You've badly overstrained your hand. Whatever technique you've been using is putting a lot of pressure on your grip. I've seen injuries like these on our beaters at school. It comes from having your hand wrapped tightly around something for too long, he explained as he worked each of the boy's fingers individually before going back to his hand and then working on his wrist. The burns are another thing but not something I can deal with right now, so I'll just have to tell you to make sure that if you're doing more of this kind of training to keep some cold water nearby to soothe the burns every half an hour to an hour. Keep your hand in the bucket of cold water for about 10 minutes and relax your hand. There, it should be somewhat better now, he decided, releasing the kid's wrist and watching as he drew it back, a flummoxed look on his face as he flexed his fingers and examined his hand. That's amazing, it doesn't hurt, he exclaimed in excitement, waving his hand around gleefully, blue eyes wide and staring at the Gryffindor with such adoration that he began to feel a little uncomfortable and flustered. He sniffed, eat your food. You'll need your energy for training later. If there was one thing he had learned about Naruto already, it was that training was the magic word. Almost immediately the blonde was grabbing his chopsticks and digging into his food with cheerful gusto, gobbling it down with all the speed of a ravenous Ron Weasley, with even less manners. Kid, slow down before you choke. Harry snapped, making the boy almost do exactly that before swallowing and blushing. But I'm hungry, he whined. Eat slower, Harry ordered, glaring at him. Your stomach stretches as you fill it with food. If you eat slower then you'll feel fuller and have less chance of a stomach ache. Plus, it's not very nice for people watching if you eat too quickly. Memories of Aunt Petunia confiscating food if he couldn't eat properly like a civilized person floated to mind. Slower, kid, chew with your mouth closed and keep your elbows in, he continued before digging into his rice, making sure to do exactly what he told the other boy to do as an example. A surly expression of concentration crossed the boy's face as he shifted his weight and followed the Gryffindor's actions, eating with almost exaggerated care if he weren't actually trying so hard to do as he was told. Harry smiled a little. How long ago had it been since he was that eager to please? Good job. Kiddo, you're doing well, he praised and couldn't help but smile in return when the boy practically beamed up at him. The two of them continued to eat their breakfast, chatting, Naruto explaining the world they were in, Harry occasionally scolding the younger blonde only to laugh a few seconds later when he argued or tried to correct himself, Naruto laughing over the faces Harry pulled when trying the new foods. The Gryffindor very nearly threw up what he had already eaten when he tried the baked beans which Naruto told him were called natto, fermented soybeans. Really, it tasted foul? It was hard to describe it without the words mold, arse, rot, and puke being used along with several colorful metaphors and a dog being involved. Naruto found his reaction absolutely rib-crackingly hilarious when he first tried it. Harry was less amused as he unceremoniously shoved the dish of natto onto the kid's tray with an expression of deep revulsion on his face. The fish were good, they were eaten with much gusto as was the soup, miso soup with tofu squares. He wasn't quite sure of the tofu but it was tasty after it had absorbed some of the miso soup flavorings. By this point he was full so he let Naruto have the rest of his tray. It was nice, Harry decided as he cleared away their dishes. The younger boy was a good kid. Clumsy and awkward, but he had a heart of gold. Telling Naruto to meet him back at the room, Harry went to see the owner of the hotel, quite the tale forming in his mind as he did so. The old man who manned the counter spotted her and frowned, obviously not recognizing her. Are you the owner? Harry asked, putting as much hesitation into his voice as possible. Almost immediately he could see the frown soften just a little. Yup, that would be me. What can I help you with, young miss? He asked, chewing on his pipe and eyeing her up and down. Harry purposefully shifted and tugged on his clothes self-consciously. My younger brother and his teacher are guests here, he began. I was supposed to be meeting them a few days ago, but when I didn't show they had to take rooms and wait for me. He thought of his current circumstances and how the twins and Ron would react if they found out he had girly parts now, and felt the blush rise up, blazing red on his cheeks, adding to his story. I got attacked on my way, Mr. Nukkinen. Stupid ones, but they took everything I had, even the clothes off my back. I was wondering if your wife had a spare change of clothes I could borrow, at least until my brother and I can get a second set, he explained, looking as imploringly at the old man as he could. His teacher offered me one of his yukata, but he tugged at it helplessly. It's not. The old man nodded in understanding, his face colored with sympathy and admiration. You must have had the ear of Lady Bentonajasama to be stood here right now if you ran into Mr. Nukkinen, the old man declared, puffing, almost proudly, on his pipe. Harry flushed and gestured down. I got used to avoiding grabby folk as soon as I blossomed, he explained awkwardly, making the innkeeper snort with laughter as he heaved himself up. I don't doubt it. Wait here a moment while I go and have a word with the missus. I think we still have some of our Kyoko-chan's old clothes from before her wedding. You'll have to tell me how you escaped from that sticky situation later, he told the Gryffindor, who, despite internally swearing as badly as Sirius when he stubbed his toe, nodded shyly with a flustered expression of embarrassment and pride on his face. Waiting a minute or so, an elderly woman appeared. She peered up at her and smiled. So you would be the lucky lady who survived the mist sharks. Well, I can see why they were interested in you. This way. I'm fairly sure we have something you could squeeze into. Really, I've been meaning to throw most of these away, so you're in good fortune, young miss. Just what every girl loves, free clothes, the woman rambled as she led the former boy into their private rooms. Her husband rummaging through a rather cramped cupboard and surfacing with a box that had a light layer of dust on top of it. I remember when Kyoko-chan was wearing those. Oh, she was such a pretty girl. Prettier than you, I would say, though I'm obviously biased. The old woman continued as she shooed her husband out and began to rummage in the box. Her summer yukata. I made this for her on the 9th Konoha Kyuabai festival. That was where she met her husband. Such a nice young man, despite his being a ninja. I did always worry about those folk, seemed so rough and violent, not to mention mysterious. Goodness me, no, her guy was such a strange one. An utter gentleman and such a strong young man, a jounin, I believe. The woman continued to chatter away as she separated the clothing into two piles. Harry could identify underwear in one and regular everyday clothing in the other. Thankfully it was mostly in reds, greens, dark blues, grays, and blacks. He couldn't see any pink staining the collection. He had to interrupt ma'am, he squeaked, silencing her glowing adoration of her only daughter and her strange yet wonderful husband. I cannot take all of these, he refused, blushing horribly. The old woman laughed and slapped her leg. Oh young miss, you can and you will. I shan't hear another word against it. Now up, she commanded, rising to her feet with a pile of clothing in hand, suddenly appearing rather menacing despite the kindly smile never leaving her face. Harry fought the urge to swallow and break out into a cold sweat before running off screaming. Not even Voldemort inspired that feeling, or Hermione during that time of the month, though Hermione came closest. Naruto frowned as he finished binning the last of the torn rubber balloons. He could have sworn he just heard a scream of terror and the sound of someone's soul breaking. His stomach gurgled happily and he just brushed it off as bowel movements, returning to bragging about his accomplishment to Erosenin, who was still half asleep. Naruto blushing horribly and feeling beyond violated, Harry quickly hurried away from the elderly woman, Hinako, with a bag stuffed of clothing over one shoulder and a pair of battered old sandals in hand as she bumped into Naruto and the old man, the youngest of which seemed surprised at her change of clothing and the elder wondering just where the hell it came from, because he most certainly didn't own such a yukata. It was warm gold with emerald green, red, brown, and gold autumn leaves printed on it with a thin black obi, silver and green bamboo shoots painted across it. Pretty, Naruto stuttered, staring bug-eyed at the Gryffindor's clothes. Any, where did you get 'em from, Nichan? He asked enthusiastically. I asked the innkeeper's wife if she had anything I could borrow, Crazy old woman gave her daughter's hand-me-downs, he explained, tugging on the fabric with an embarrassed expression on his face. I feel weird wearing this. I want some bloody trousers, he grumbled. Jiraiya snorted and started laughing as he got himself some breakfast. Well, while Naruto's off training for the second half of his jutsu, I'll take you shopping, how's that? He suggested with what was most definitely a perverted look in his eye. Harry gave him a flat, disbelieving look, unbeknownst to him that Naruto was copying the exact same expression having seen it on his face. Jiraiya refrained from chuckling at the sight, but it was difficult. Try to remember that despite the boobs, I am a guy. In other words, penis, hairy arse, sweaty pits, picking my nose, farting, and thinking it's hilarious, belching contests, projectile vomit. By this point Jiraiya was chalk white and waving his hands, desperately trying to get the Gryffindor to shut the hell up, but Harry was ruthless, hammering each point home with a nasty little smirk on his face. Naruto watching him effectively stop his teacher's perviness with awe-filled eyes. Enough? I got it. Here, go shopping by yourself, the cage-level Jounin wailed, shoving his wallet over at the now grinning blonde-haired girl who scooped it up, checked the insides and nodded before hesitating, a frown creasing her face. Jiraiya blinked at her. What's wrong? He asked. Harry shook his head and pocketed the wallet. Nothing, just an unwelcome thought, he assured the man, waving it off like a cloud of mosquitoes. The man shrugged and ate, practically ordering Naruto to explain where he got the idea of using two hands to work his jutsu came from. Harry, however, was wondering, why wasn't he trying to find a way back home? He had been here a few hours and already it felt like he was making a home for himself here, with the kid and the old pervert. He had just clicked with them in a way he hadn't since, ever. He should probably try to leave before he became too attached and vice versa. It would be more painful for everyone involved if he didn't make his escape. Already he was missing Ron and Hermione. And it hadn't even been a full 24 hours, heck, probably not even 12 hours. Harry looked up at Jiraiya while Naruto was busy cheering and gave him a very serious look, the white-haired man immediately realizing that they were going to be having words as soon as Naruto was out of earshot. Naruto. In reality, he could understand the girl's feelings. She had a life of her own back home and she died. She had every intention of going to the afterlife and staying there with those already departed, but she was still alive, and in her mind that meant she still had a job to do. Jiraiya could respect that. He did respect that. She wasn't about to let herself die now that she had no need to. The only problem is, I don't know how to get back, she admitted, wringing her hands in frustration as they sat at the dango stall. Jiraiya sighed and pushed her plate over to her. She dubiously ate one of the sweets before allowing herself another, clearly enjoying it. You don't want to get attached to Naruto, he concluded. She nodded and sipped her sweetened milk tea. Yeah, he's a good kid, a heart of real gold. But there was a war back home, and everyone was kind of expecting me to win it for them, she admitted, staring down at her drink morosely. So many people have died already. If I don't go back, more are going to follow. Jiraiya rubbed at his chin, a real dilemma. He lifted his hands defensively when he saw the caustic glare she was shooting him. No, really, I understand. I've fought in wars as well, you know. I understand. However, I'm not quite sure about how you even got here, let alone how to send you back. There are theories, but they're all about as cockamamie as those rumors of me and my ex-teammate having a secret gay relationship. He pulled a face. Like hell, he was born to love the ladies, not make friends with them, and regardless of how girly Orochimaru looked, there was no way he would let Jiraiya top. So no way in hell were they going to screw each other, because Jiraiya, the toad sage and super pervert of legend, was no one's butt bunny. Harry sighed and stared down at his drink, fingers gripping the ceramic tightly. I can contact the toad sages, see what they have to say on the matter. They do go to your people to study senjutsu, I mean magic, Jiraiya explained with a shake of his head. If you could, please, that would be great, the blonde girl said with a weak smile, obvious.
You got something to hide.